Shalom, Yasha'Allah. This is Brother Mapatat, right? That'd be key, but in the ancient Paleo Hebrew, right? And there's going to be a video going into Nebuchadnezzar's dream in Daniel 2, right? We're going to go into Daniel 2, but we chiefly going to really deal with the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, you understand? And before we go into it, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to the Most High God, Yahweh, by Shema Mashiach Yahweh Shai, right? That'd be all praises to the Most High God, Yahweh, in the name of his only begotten Son, who the world would ignorantly call Jesus Christ, but we know him as Yahweh Shai, right? And I want to get right into this thing, man, right? I kind of just went into it for an hour, man, and my damn microphone wasn't on, man, but it's all of the Lord, right? So we're going to get back into this thing, right? So we're going to start with verse 1. We're going to get a little bit of context, right? But we chiefly going to deal with the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, right? So this is the book of Daniel, chapter 2 and verse 1, and it reads, in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreams, right? Wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. So Nebuchadnezzar was having dreams, right? And it says, and the king commanded to call the magicians and the astrologers and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans for to show to the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king. And the king said unto them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. Right? Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac, right? O king, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. So you had his wise men. He called unto him wise men to give him the interpretation of the dream, right? And the king answered and said unto the Chaldeans, the thing is gone from me. If you will not make unknown to me the dream with the interpretation thereof, you shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill, right? So that's how you know Nebuchadnezzar was kind of wicked, man. That man was wicked, right? Hey, he's expecting them to remember his dream and to give him the interpretation thereof. How the hell is they supposed to remember your dream, right? But I want to jump to the point, right? So the wise men weren't able to do this thing, right? It was impossible, man. That's like a brother kind of going to sleep and then wake up and call you like, brother, I just had a dream. I need you to tell me what the dream was and the interpretation thereof. Hey, man, that's kind of impossible, man, right? So he just to give a little bit of context without having to read the whole chapter, he basically said, man, any of the I'm gonna kill all my wise men, right? And the wise men included Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as well, right? But Daniel ended up getting the dream and the interpretation thereof through a dream from the Most High God, right? And we're gonna jump to that point. I'm gonna jump to verse 18. We're gonna get to the point, right? It says that they would desire mercies of the Most High God of heaven concerning this secret, right? Talking about the king's dream, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the Most High God of heaven, right? So Daniel ended up getting the revelation, right, in the dream of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, right, and the interpretation thereof, right? So now we're going to get into the dream, right? So let's read this. We're going to read the dream, and then we're going to go back through it and break it down through the spirit and power of Yahweh by Shem Yahweh Shai, right? Lord willing, this is edifying, man, because I know a lot of brothers, right, be wanting the understanding of this dream, man, all right? So I'm going to start from 31. Daniel 2 and verse 31, and it reads, Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible, right? This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, right? So Daniel kind of saw a statue of a man who had a head of gold, right? Breast and arms of silver, his belly and thighs of brass, right? Verse 33, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and break them to pieces, right? Verse 35, then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king, right? So I'm going to kind of give brothers a visual of this dream, right? Daniel 2 dream, right? right? Because Jake like to see a visual, man. It's profitable to kind of see a visual before we go into it. All right, so let's get this. So this is a good depiction of what Daniel was describing, right? The head of gold, the chest and arms of silver, the stomach, the belly and the thighs of brass, and the legs of iron, and the feet of clay and iron, right? So in the stone cut without hands that kind of broke it down, right? So this is a good depiction of the dream. You understand? So now we're gonna go back through it and break it down, right? Through the spirit. So we're gonna read verse 32 again. This image head was of fine gold, right? And just a set of bases, right? The quality of the metal, right, represents the authority of that kingdom, right? And the strength of that metal represents the military might, right? The military strength, right? Just to set that basis. And we're gonna kind of I'm gonna make it plain as we kind of go through it and break it down. Right? Just in case that wasn't clear enough, right? So let's go into it. Verse 32, Daniel 2 and 32. This image's head was of fine gold. So this is what we're going to deal with first. We're going to deal with the head of gold, right? And the head of gold represents the Neo-Babylonian Empire, right? And it was likened unto gold because, like we just went into, Salakia, the quality of gold is greater than all the other metals that's part of this statue, right? Part of this image, right? Because the authority of Nebuchadnezzar, right, in the Neo-Babylonian Empire was greater than the rest of these kingdoms that's in this vision, right? But on the strength level, gold is the softest and the weakest metal that's on the image, right? Because their military might is less than the rest of the nations that's in this dream, right? So let's deal with it. So this gold head that we're looking at right now represents the Neo-Babylonian Empire, right? Which lasted from 626 BC to 539 BC. You understand? And we're gonna get a little bit of history on it, right? The Neo-Babylonian Empire, also known as the Second Babylonian Empire and historically known as the Chaldean Empire, was the last of the Mesopotamian empires to be ruled by monarchs native to Mesopotamia, right? Beginning with Nabopolassar, right? That's the first king, right? You had Nabopolassar, then you had Nebuchadnezzar, right? He was the second king. Coronation as king of Babylon in 626, being firmly established through the fall of the Neo-Assyrian Empire in 612 BC, right? And it says, the Neo-Babylonian Empire and its ruling Chaldean dynasty would be short-lived, being conquered after less than a century by the Persian Achaemenid Empire, right? That's going into the Medo-Persian Empire, right? And we're going to go into that as well in 539 BC, right? So the Neo-Babylonian Empire was from 626 BC to 539 BC, right? And we're going to show why the authority of Nebuchadnezzar is likened unto gold, right? And this also is one head of gold, right? The rest of the nations are separated between a chest, 2 arms, right? 2 feet and 10 toes, right? Going into the separation of the kingdoms and the separation of the authorities, right? But King Nebuchadnezzar, he was one man that ruled over all, and that's why he's likened unto gold, right? And it's one head, right? So let's go into it. Let's go into the book of Judith, right? Let's go into the book of Judith. Judith chapter 3 and verse number 8, right? Just to show the authority that Nebuchadnezzar had on the earth, right? So this is the book of the influence and the authority, the power, right? This is the book of Judith chapter 3 and verse 8, and it reads, "Yet he did cast down their frontiers and cut down their groves, for he had decreed to destroy all the gods of the land," right? "That all nations should worship Nebuchadnezzar only, and that all tongues and tribes should call upon him as God." So he made a decree that all nations should worship him, right? And that all tongues and tribes should call upon him as God. This is the power that this man had on the earth, right? And when we go through it, you're going to realize that the rest of these nations, they didn't have the same authority as Nebuchadnezzar had, right? That's why Nebuchadnezzar was likened unto gold, right? That golden head, because of the authority that he had, right? Right, so like I want to stay in Judith. and go to verse 6. I mean, chapter 6 and verse 2. And it reads, and it says, who art thou, Achir, and the hirelings of Ephraim, that thou hast prophesied amongst us as today, and hast said that we should not make war with the people of Israel, because their God will defend them. And who is God but Nebuchadnezzar? Right? So you had these men saying, and this was Holofernes, right? Heathen, right? He said, who is God but Nebuchadnezzar, man? Right? So this is the power that this man had on the earth. Hey, you had men calling him God. He said, who is God but Nebuchadnezzar? Right? He said, who is Yahweh, man? Right? Read that again. It says that we should not make war with the people of Israel, because their God will defend them. And he said, who is God but Nebuchadnezzar? Right? Let's get one more. Right? So this is the power this man had. No other king, right, that's in his vision had the same power as Nebuchadnezzar on the earth. Right? So this is the book of 1 Ezra chapter 4 and verse 1. And it reads, then the second that has spoken of the strength of the king began to say, O ye men, do not men excel in strength, that bear rule over sea and land, and all things in them? But yet the king is more mighty, right? For he is Lord of all things, and have dominion over them. And whatsoever he commandeth them, they do. Right? So they're saying Nebuchadnezzar is the Lord of all things, and whatsoever he demanded them, they do. This is the power that he had on the earth, the influence, the authority. Right? And it says, if thee bid them make war the one against the other, they do it. Right? So if Nebuchadnezzar say, man, y'all go to war against one another, they're going to do it. And it says, and if he send them out against the enemies, they go. And if he say, man, y'all go out and go get the enemies, they going to go. There's no questioning them, right? Hey, he had full power, right? And it says, and break down mountains, walls, and towers. They slay and are slain, and transgress not the king's commandment. And they're not going to transgress Nebuchadnezzar's commandments, right? If they get the victory, they bring it all to the king, as well as the spoil as all things else. So even if they win a war, they bring all the spoils to Nebuchadnezzar. You understand? This is the power that this man had, right? So that's that head of gold, right? Right. So now we're gonna go back to Daniel 2, right? So that's that head of gold. Let's look at the picture again. Daniel 2 dream and kind of get in there, man. Right, I'm gonna keep kind of letting y'all see the visual through the spirit. Right. So that's that head of gold. That's dealing with Nebuchadnezzar. Now we're gonna deal with the chest of silver, the chest and the two arms of silver, right? So now it goes from one head to being separated between two arms and a chest. You understand? Because hey, that's dealing with the authority as well, right? So let's go into it. So this Daniel 2 and verse 32 again. And it says, this image's head was of fine gold, right? And we just went into it. That's dealing with the Neo-Babylonian Empire, right? And it says, his breast and his arms of silver, right? So now we're dealing with the Medo-Persian Empire. That's the chest and the arms of silver, right? Let's kind of go in there, right? Medo-Persian Empire dates, right? And the Medo-Persian Empire, also known as the Achaemenid Empire, lasted from 550 BC, right, to 330 BC, right? Some scholars will say 331, but approximately 330 BC, right? 550 BC to 330 BC. And let's get a brief summary on the Persian Empire, right? And it says, in the Achaemenid Empire, right, also called the First Persian Empire, was an ancient Iranian empire that was based in Western Asia and founded by Cyrus the Great in 550 BC, right? It reached its greatest extent under Xerxes I, who conquered most of northern and central ancient Greece. At its greatest territory extent, the Achaemenid Empire stretched from the Balkans and Eastern Europe in the west to the Indus Valley in the east. The empire was larger than any previous empire in history, spanning a total of 5.5 million square kilometers, right? So the Persian Empire was large, man, right? Let's see if we could get a map on it. Real quick, Persian Empire map, right? All right, let's see if we get a good map on it. Right, you see that? So this thing is kind of large, man. See that green? That's the Persian Empire, man. It was humongous, right? right? And you can read about that. Let me get that real quick in Esther through the Spirit. Let's bring that out real quick, right? So it was humongous, right? So this is the book of Esther, chapter 1 and verse 1, and it reads, "Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus, this is Ahasuerus, which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia over 107 provinces," right? So it was from India even unto Ethiopia, right? And it was over 107 provinces, right? So the Persian Empire was humongous, right? But now we're going to deal with the metal, right? So like we were going into, the strength of the metal represents the military might. The quality of the metal represents the authority, right? And the power that they had on the earth, right? So let's go into it. So now we're going to show how they defeated the Babylonian Empire, right? Because silver is stronger than gold on the strength level, right? So it was the let's go into it. The Battle of Apis, right? In 539 BC. We're gonna get a brief summary of it, right? So this is the Battle of Apis, right? It says the Battle of Apis was the last major military engagement between the Achaemenid, right, which we keep going into, which is the Medo-Persian Empire, and the Neo-Babylonian Empire, which took place in September 539 BC during the Persian invasion of Mesopotamia, right? At the time, Babylonia was the last major power in Western Asia that was not yet under Persian control. The battle was fought in or near the strategic riverside battle of Salakia, city of Apis, located north of the capital city of Babylon in modern-day Iraq, and resulted in a decisive victory for Persia, right? And it says, shortly afterwards, the Babylonian city of Sapir surrendered to Persian forces, who then supposedly entered Babylon without facing any further resistance, right? So they kind of just marched in there. The Persian king Cyrus the Great was subsequently proclaimed as the king of Babylonia and its subject territories, right? Thus ending its independence and incorporating the entirety of the fallen Neo-Babylonian Empire into the greater Medo-Persian Empire, right? And brothers want to get deeper into the history, they can kind of go into it, man. I'm just trying to get a brief summary so we can kind of just go through the lesson, right? So the Medo-Persian Empire took down the Babylonian Empire in 539 BC in the Battle of Apis, right? And let's go into Daniel 7 real quick, because the same nations that Nebuchadnezzar seen in his dream in Daniel 2 is the same nations that Daniel seen in his dream in Daniel 7, right? So this is the book of Daniel, chapter 7 and verse 5, and it reads, "And behold, another beast, a second like to a bear," right? So this bear that Daniel seen was also going into the Medo-Persian Empire, right? And it says, "And it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it," right? And that 3 ribs represents 3 different nations that was taken down by the Persian Empire, right? And it says, "And they said thus unto it, arise, devour much flesh," right? So just in case brothers want to kind of get in there and kind of jot down these different nations that was taken down, the 3 ribs, right? They represent Babylon, which we just went into, which they took down in 539 BC in the Battle of Apis, right? They represent the Lydian Empire, which they took down in 545 BC, and Egypt, which they took down in 525 BC, right? So that's why they're represented as silver. Silver is a stronger metal than gold, right? And that's why they were able to take down the Medo-Persian Empire. You understand? But silver is also less in quality than gold, because their authority, the authority of the kings of Persia, right? And chiefly, I'm gonna deal with King Darius, wasn't the same as the authority as King Nebuchadnezzar, right? And we're gonna prove it, right? Let's go back a chapter, and we're gonna go into Daniel 6, right? So this is the book of Daniel, chapter 6 and verse 10, and it reads, "Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he knelt down upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime," right? Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. Then they came near and spake before the king concerning the king's decree. "Hast thou not signed a decree that every man that shall ask a petition of any god or man within 30 days, save of thee, O king, shall be cast into the lion's den?" So they kind of asked the king Darius, like, "Hey, I thought everybody who who ask a petition of their God besides you, they got to be thrown into the lions then, right? And it says, the king answered and said, this thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. You see that? So the king couldn't even alter the law of the Medes and Persians. Even though he was the king, he couldn't go back and be like, hey, I'm going to do what I want to do, right? He had to still abide by the laws that were already established, right? It says, the thing is true according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. Hey, and Nebuchadnezzar wasn't like that, man. Nebuchadnezzar could do whatever the hell he wanted to do, right? Because he was the king, that one golden head. You see that? And it says, so they didn't have the same authority and power as the Neo-Babylonian Empire had on the earth, right? Their leadership wasn't the same, right? Their influence wasn't the same. It says, verse 13, then answered they and said before the king that Daniel, which is of the children of the captivity of Judah, regardeth not thee, O king, nor the decree that thou hast signed, but maketh his petition 3 times a day. Then the king, when he heard these words, was sore displeased with himself, right? Because the king didn't want to have to put Daniel in the lion's den, right? He didn't want to have to put Daniel to death, man. He actually liked Daniel, right? And it says, and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him, and he labored to the going down of the sun to deliver him, right? So he couldn't just be like, no, hey, Daniel not going in there, right? Forget that of that law, Daniel not going in there, right? He didn't have that power, you understand? But that's the power that Nebuchadnezzar had. Nebuchadnezzar could have been like, man, well, we're not putting Daniel in there, right? But he doesn't have that same power, right? That same authority, all right? And it says, then these men assembled unto the king and said unto the king, know, O king, that the law of the Medes and Persians is that no decree nor statute which the king established may be changed. So they telling the king, you got men that's under the king telling the king, hey, you can't change none of those laws, right? So that's why their authority, right, was likened unto silver, right? So they had less authority than the Neo-Babylonian Empire, right? So they telling the king Darius, you can't change any of those laws. You got to go by them, man, right? How the hell are you going to tell the king what to do, right? So let's go back into Daniel 2. Right, so that's the silver, right? That's the silver chest and the silver arms. That's the Medo-Persian Empire, right? From 550 to 331 BC, right? So now we're going to deal with the brass. Let's read 32 again. So this is the book of Daniel, chapter 2 and verse 32, and it reads, this image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, right? So now we're going to go into that belly and thighs of brass. And this is dealing with the Greek Empire, right? Which took down the Persians and Medes in 331 BC in the Battle of Guatemala, right? So we're going to get that first. Battle of Guatemala, right? We're going to get a brief summary on it, right? It says, the Battle of Guatemala, also called the Battle of Arbela, was a battle that took place in 331 BC between the forces of the army of Macedon under Alexander the Great and the Persian army under King Darius III, right? And let me see if I can get a better summary on it. Let's get this real quick. It says the fighting took place in Guatemala, which literally meant the camel's house, a village on the banks of the river Bamadas. The area today will be considered modern-day northern Iraq. Alexander's army was heavily outnumbered, and modern historians say that the odds were enough to give the most experienced veteran pause. Despite the overwhelming odds, Alexander's army emerged victorious due to the employment of superior tactics and the clever usage of light infantry forces. So they said the Grecians were outnumbered, man, right? But they were just better when it came to war, man. Right, they had superior tactics and clever usage of light infantry forces. It was a divisive victory for the League of Corinth, and it led to the fall of the Persian Medo Empire, right, the Achaemenid Empire, and Darius III, right? So this is, hey, that's why they're likened unto brass, right? Because brass is a stronger metal than silver, right? That's why they were able to take them down. They were better at war than them. Their military might was better, right? But brass is less quality than silver, meaning their authority and their power wasn't the same on the earth, right? So we're going to go into it. So the Greeks took down the Persians in 331 BC in the Battle of Guatemala, right? So I'm going to get I want to keep going back to this picture just to keep this in brother's mind, right? Through the spirit. And then we're going to deal with the Grecians, right? Just show I want to show this picture again. That's it, right? Right. So now we dealt with the head of gold. right? We deal with the silver arms and the chest, and now we're dealing with the brass stomach and thighs, right? Which is the Grecians, right? So let's go into the book of Daniel 8. Right? So we just read about how Alexander the Great and the Grecians took down the Medo-Persian Empire, right? And we're going to read about it out of the scriptures. Right? So it's the book of Daniel chapter 8 and verse 3, and it reads, "Then I lifted up my eyes and saw." So this is another vision that Daniel had, right? It says, "Then I lifted up my eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had two horns," right? So this ram that Daniel is seeing in this vision represents the Persian Medo Empire, right? The two horns represents Media, right, in Persia, right? And the two horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the one that was higher than the other was Persia. You understand? Because the Persians took down the Medes. You understand? That's why they're called the Medo-Persian Empire. The Persians took down the Medes, right? And it says, "And the higher came up last," right? And it says, "I saw the ram pushing westward," right? So he saw the ram pushing westward, right, and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him, right? Because the Persian and Medes were taking over the world, right? They had, like when we went into the map, they took over a lot of the land and the earth, right? And it says, so that no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, right? Because the Persian and Medes had a lot of power, but he did according to his will and became great, right? And it says, "And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth," right? So this is talking about the Grecians. Let me see if I get that map again, right? Empire map. I'm just trying to get a quick map, right? Just to show something real fast. Right, so they said they seen a land come from the west. Slovakia. Right, from the west. Let me see if I can get ancient Greek map, right? Slovakia, bear with me. Right, so you see Greece is on the west. Right, so that's what it's talking about in this what we see, and it's talking about Greece, right? When he said he seen that goat coming from the west. I'm gonna read that again. It says, verse 5, and it says, "And as I was considering, behold, and he goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth." That's talking about the Grecians, right? And it says, "And touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes," right? And that horn is talking about Alexander the Great. Right, and it says, "And he came to the ram that had two horns," right, and he came up to the Medo-Persian Empire, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power, right? "And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram," right? Because the ancient Greeks, they destroyed the Medo-Persian Empire, man, like we just read in the Battle of Guatemala, "and break his two horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him. But he cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Therefore, the he-goat waxed very great," right? So the Grecians, they waxed great, man. The ancient Greek empire, they waxed great, right? "And when he was strong, the great horn was broken," right? Because Alexander the Great, he died, right? Some would say of syphilis, some would say of HIV, right? Because he was a damn sodomite, right? And it says, "And for it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven," right? And that's talking about the four generals that came up after Alexander the Great died. You understand? We're gonna go into that, right? So they took him down in the Battle of Guatemala in 331 BC, right? And then Alexander the Great ended up dying, right? Let's go into it, right? Let's go to Daniel 7 and get verse 6, right? And it says, "After this I beheld, lo, another beast like a leopard," right? So this is still talking about the Greek Empire, right? That leopard represents the Greek Empire, right? Which had upon the back of it four wings of a fowl, right? And the four wings represents the four jurisdictions given to Alexander's generals after his death, right? And it says, Salakia, where was I just reading that? Right, four wings of a fowl, the beast had also 4 heads, right? And the 4 heads represents the 4 generals that we were just talking about, right? And dominion was given unto it, right? So we're going to go into the generals, right? So these are the 4 generals, right? You had Cassander, right? Cassander, right, was the king of ancient Greek kingdom, was the king of the ancient Greek kingdom of Macedonia, right, from 305 BC until 297 BC, right? So this is one of the generals that rose up after the death of King Alexander, right? And you had Lysimachus, right? Lysimachus was a Thessalonian officer and successor of Alexander the Great, who in 306 BC became king of Thrace, Asia Minor, and Macedon, right? So that's 2 out of the 4 of the 4 generals, right? And now we have Seleucus the first, right? Seleucus the first, right? And it says Seleucus first, right? Macedonian army, founder of the Seleucid dynasty. After the death of Alexander the Great, under whom he had served, Seleucus won an empire centered on Syria and Iran, right? So he chiefly was the head over Syria and Iran, right? Syria and Mesopotamia, right? Let's go into the last one, right? Which is Ptolemy the first, right? Ptolemy was an ancient Macedonian general, historian, and companion of Alexander the Great of the kingdom of Macedon, right? In northern Greece, who became ruler of Egypt, right? Part of Alexander's former empire. Ptolemy was pharaoh of Ptolemaic Egypt from 305 or 304 BC to his death, right? So Ptolemy chiefly ruled over the Holy Land, right? Egypt and parts of North Africa, right? And we understand that on a quality level, brass is less valuable than gold, right? And we already went into on the strength level, brass is stronger, than silver, and brass is stronger than silver on the military level, on the strength level. That's why they were able to take down the Medo-Persian Empire. You understand, right? But now we're going to show why they didn't have the power, right, and the amount of authority as the Persians, right? Because Greece has city-states, right? So they were divided, right? Like when you think about, let's say, for example, America, right? We're the United States of America, right? But they have different states. Man, they have 50 different states, which all have different laws. If I go to Chicago, they might have a different gun law than Buffalo. Buffalo might have a different gun law than Alabama. Texas might have a different gun law than Cincinnati, right? So they were separated, man. Right? They weren't all under one accord, right? When King Nebuchadnezzar, when he was in power, when he was in authority, everything was in one accord. Whatever he says goes. But now you got all these different city-states where different men rule over these different city-states, and they all damn got their own laws, right? Their own damn understandings, you understand? Right? So now their power level is not the same. Right? The Lord said a kingdom that's divided against itself cannot stand. Right? So let's go into these different city-states real quick. Right? The first one is called the Delian League, right? And it says the Delian League was founded in 478 BC following the Persian War to be a military alliance against any enemies that might threaten Ionian Greeks. The rest of the group was compromised mainly of Greek city-states. You see that? So they had different city-states. You understand that? Weren't on one accord. They had different laws, different jurisdictions. You understand? They weren't like the Persian and Medes, right? Who had kings, right? They weren't like the Babylonian Empire, right? And it says in Asia Minor and the islands of the Aegean who needed water-based protection from the Persians, right? So that's one league, right? You had the League of Corinth as well, right? The League of Corinth, right? We're going to get a brief summary. The League of Corinth, also referred to as the Hellenic League, was a confederation of Greek states created by Philip II in 338 through 337 BC. The League was created in order to unify Greek military forces under Macedonian leadership and their combined conquest of Persia, right? And you also had the Achaean League, right? So they had all these different city-states. right? The Achaean League. Right, the Achaean League was a Hellenistic era confederation of the Greek city-states on the northern and central Peloponnesus, right? Salakia for pronunciation. The league was named after the region of Achaia in the northwestern Peloponnesus, which formed its original core. The first league was formed in the 5th century BC, right? So they had all these damn different city-states, man, right, that was doing their own thing, had different laws and different leaders, you understand? Right? Let's get a quick precept on that, right? Just through the Spirit, Matthew 12, the classic, and 25, right? And it reads, and Yahushua knew their thoughts and said unto them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, right? If your kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, right? Right, and that's why it was destined for the Greeks to fall, right? Because these Edomites don't have any order. They don't know how to run a kingdom. It says, in every city or house divided against itself shall not stand. Right, so they were never meant to stand from the foundation of the earth, man. Right, on the spirit, if you want to get spiritual, right? These Edomites never knew how to run a damn kingdom, right? And Greece also had a democracy, right? Let's get that real quick. Ancient Greece democracy, right? It says Greek democracy created at Athens was direct rather than representative. Any adult male citizen over the age 20 could take part, and it was duty to do so. The officials of the democracy were in part elected by the assembly and in large part chosen by lottery in a process called sortition, right? And democracy is basically, in lack of better terms, is to give power to the citizens, right? Hey, Nebuchadnezzar wasn't giving power to the citizens. Whatever he say went, right? Damn, King Darius and the Persian kings wasn't giving power to citizens, man. Right? But now you got these damn Grecians who giving power unto the people, right? So which lessens their authority and their order, right? Because they let everybody have a say-so in what should go down, right? It says, let's read this real quick. It says, how did ancient Greece's democracy work? It says, and this is from Ducksters.com. It says, democracy in ancient Greece was very direct. What this means is that all the citizens voted on all the laws. So you had the damn citizens having say-so on what the laws should be, right? So this is why their authority was likened unto brass. Their quality was likened unto brass, right? Because they didn't really have the same authority as the kings before them, right? And it says, rather than vote for representatives like we do, each citizen was expected to vote for every law. They did have officials to run the government, however, right? But the point is they don't have the same authority as the nations before them, right? That's why they're likened unto brass. But brass is a stronger metal than the nations before them. That's why they were able to take down the Medo-Persian Empire. You understand? Right? So let's go back to Daniel 2. Salaki, let's get the picture real quick. We're going to keep going back to the picture. Salaki, I'm going off. Daniel 2 dream, right? We're going to keep going back to this picture so brothers could have that visual, man, right? Right, so it's that picture. You got the head, which we went into, the head of gold, which is the Neo-Babylonian Empire, right? You got the chest and the arms of silver, which is the Medo-Persian Empire, and you got the belly of brass and as well as the thighs of brass, which we just finished going into, which is the Greek Empire, right? And now we're going into the legs of iron, right? Which is the Roman Empire, right? So let's read it. It's the book of, let's go to Daniel 2. It's the book of Daniel chapter 2 and verse number 33, right? And it says, his legs of iron, right? So that's what we're dealing with now. We're dealing with the legs of iron, which represents the Roman Empire. And iron is a stronger metal than brass, and that's why Rome was able to take down Greece. Right, and they took them down in the Illyrian Wars, right, and chiefly the Macedonian Wars, right. But you also had the Illyrian Wars, right, and we'll get a brief summary on it, right. And it reads, the Illyrian Wars were a series of wars fought between the Roman Republic and the Ardii Kingdom, and the first Illyrian War, which lasted from 229 BC to 228 BC, right. It says, Rome's concern was that the trade across the Adriatic Sea increased after the First Punic War at a time where Ardii power increased under Queen Tuta, right? So that's the first couple of wars, but when Rome really took them down and came into power was in the Macedonian Wars, right? Which is a series of, I believe, 4 different wars, right? But we're going to get a brief summary on it. And I'm a what's the word I'm looking for? I would say, brothers, if brothers want to kind of get deeper into this thing, man, you can kind of go back into the history and get a little deeper into it, man. We're just going to get the brief summaries, right? And this is the book of Salakia. This is the Macedonian Wars, and it says from 214 BC to 148 BC, right? The Macedonian Wars were a series of conflicts fought by the Roman Republic, right? Because the Roman Empire was first known as the Roman Republic before they came into full power, and its Greek allies in the Eastern Mediterranean against several different major Greek kingdoms. They resulted in Roman control or influence over Greece and the rest of the Eastern Mediterranean basin. In addition to their hegemony in the Western Mediterranean after the Punic Wars, traditionally the Macedonian Wars include the 4 wars with Macedonia, in addition to 1 war with Seleucid Empire and the final minor war with the Achaean League, right? I want to kind of jump down. I'm going to jump down to the last sentence, right? It says, the outcome of the war with the now deteriorating Seleucid Empire was ultimately fatal to it as well, though the growing influence of Parthia and Pontus prevented any additional conflicts between it and Rome, right? So in the Macedonian wars, right, you can kind of read the whole thing yourself, right? But in the Macedonian Wars is when the Roman Empire when the Romans came into power, man, when they took down the Grecians, right? And so let's go into it. We're gonna read about this in Maccabees, right? Go to First Maccabees chapter 8, right? So this is the book of First Maccabees chapter 8, and we're gonna start from the top, and it reads, now Judas had heard of the fame of the Romans, that they were mighty and valiant men, right? So the Romans were mighty and valiant men, and such as would lovingly accept all that joined themselves unto them, and make a league of amity with all that came unto them, and that they were men of great valor, right? And it was told him also of their wars and noble acts which they had done amongst the Galatians, and how they had conquered them and brought them under tribute, right? So they conquered the Galatians, right? And it says, on what they had done in the country of Spain for the winning of the mines of the silver and gold which is there, and that by their policy and patience they had conquered all that place. So they conquered all of Spain, right? So the Romans were powerful, right? On a military level. That's what they liken it to iron, because iron is the strongest metal, right? It says, though it were very far from them, and the kings also that came against them from the uttermost parts of the earth, till they had discomfited them and given them a great overthrow, so that the rest did give them tribute every year. So you had different nations, different kings giving tribute unto the Roman Empire, right? It says, besides this, how they had discomfited in battle Philip and Persia's king of the Scythians, right? And it says, which others that lift up themselves against them had overcame them, right? Now that word Scythian is really going into dealing with Macedonia. And it says, verse 6, how also Antiochus, the great king of Asia, that came against them in battle, having 120 elephants with horsemen and chariots, and a very great army, was discomfited by them. So they taking down everything that came in their path. And how they took him alive and covenanted that he and such as reign after him shall pay a great tribute and give hostages, and that which was agreed upon. It says, in the country of India and Media and Lydia and the goodliest countries, which they took of him and gave to King Eumenes, right? See that? So that's how the Rome was getting down, right? So the Macedonian Wars was 4 conflicts between the Roman Republic and the kingdom of Macedonia, right? And they hoped to lead to the Roman domination of the entire Eastern Mediterranean area. You understand? Right? So Rome was kind of getting down, right? And you can read about these things in the scriptures, right? It's history in the Bible, right? So how do people say the Bible is only a book about damn fairy tales, man? Right? So, but let's go back into Daniel 7, right? So all these kingdoms that you see in Nebuchadnezzar's dream in Daniel 2, you can read about them in Daniel 7 as well, right? So this is the book of Daniel, chapter 7 and verse 7. It reads, after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, right? So this is talking about the Roman Empire, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth, and it devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns, right? And this beast was an eagle, right? So in Daniel's vision, he couldn't really perceive what it was, right? How he understood that the Grecians were the leopards. I mean, that was a leopard, right? The Persians was a bear, and the Babylonians were likened it to a lion. But he didn't get an exact revelation of what animals this was that he was seeing in his vision, right? But when you go precept upon precept, you're going to see what it was, right? So let's go into the book of 2nd Esdras 12. Because Esdras was given the same revelation, right? He was given a little more than what Daniel seen, because Daniel couldn't perceive that it was an eagle, but Esdras did, right? Salakia. So this is the book of 2nd Esdras chapter 12 and verse 11, and it reads, "The eagle whom thou sawest come up from the sea is the kingdom which was seen in the vision of thy brother Daniel," right? So Esdras he's seeing the same kingdom that Daniel saw, right? And it says verse 12, "But it was not expounded unto him, therefore now I declare it unto thee," right? So he didn't know what it was. You understand? It wasn't expounded unto him, but the Most High God declared it unto Esdras. In verse 13 it says, "Behold, the days will come that there shall rise up a kingdom upon earth, and it shall be fair above all the kingdoms that were before it," right? But the point I wanted to get from this is that it was an eagle that Daniel was seeing, right? I'm going to go to verse 14, and it says, "And the same shall 12 kings reign one after another." And that's talking about the 12 Caesars that reigned in the Roman Empire, right? So let's get that real quick. 12 Caesars, right? We're going to kind of go through them. Right. Right, that's what I want right here, right? So this is the 12 Caesars. You got Augustus, right? You got Caligula, you got Tiberius, you got Claudius, you got Nero, you got Domitian, you got Vespasian, you got Galba, you got Titus, right? You got Vitellius, you got Otho, you got Caracalla, right? You got Salakia, because they got kind of different names as well. But you got Gordian, and you got Severus Alexander, right? Because they got different names, right? I want to get the names that they're chiefly known for, right? Right, so I'm gonna read it from here. It says this: you got Julius Caesar, you got Augustus, you got Tiberius, you got Caligula, you got Claudius, you got Nero, you got Galba, you got Otho, you got Vitellius, you got Vespasian, you got Titus, and you got Domitian, right? So these are the names that they chiefly known for, because a lot of them be having different names, you understand? They be known by more than one name, right? But these are the ones that brothers kind of taking notes. You want to kind of jot these down, right? And in the Roman Empire, right, they're likened unto iron, because they didn't have a king, right? They had less authority than even the Grecians. You understand? They were divided even more than the Grecians, right? So let's go into that, right? So they were stronger, right? That's why they're likened to iron. But the quality of iron is bad. You understand, right? Because their authority was all divided and split up, right? So let's go back into the book of Maccabees. So this is the book of 1st Maccabees, chapter 8 and verse 14, right? So this is the book of 1st Maccabees, chapter 8 and verse 14. It reads, "Yet for all this, none of them wore a crown," right? And it's talking about the Greek Empire. It says, "Yet for all this, none of them wore a crown," right? So they didn't have a king that was crowned over everybody, or was clothed in purple to be magnified thereby, right? And it says, "Moreover, how they had made for themselves a Senate house," right? So just like we got a Senate house in America, they had that in the Roman Empire, wherein 320 men sat in council daily, right? So they had 320 men kind of sitting in the council talking over each other, man, right? You know that damn Senate house spirit that the Edomites got, right? Let me Google that, kind of give a visual. Senate house, right? See that? It's this spirit, man. Where's a bunch of Edomites yelling over each other, right? They none of them on one accord, right? So like, you have one king, which is Nebuchadnezzar in the Neo-Babylonian Empire, who just called all the shots. He didn't care what nobody else had to say. Hey, the Edomites got a damn, in the Roman Empire, they had a Senate house where everybody kind of got damn counsel and ideas and nobody on one accord type spirit, right? This started in Rome, right? That's how you know we living in modern day Rome right now, right? So let's go back to it. I'm gonna read verse 15 again. It says, moreover, they had made for themselves a Senate house, wherein 320 men sat in council daily, consulting a way for the people, to the end that they might be well ordered, right? To the end that they might be well ordered, right? Because they didn't really have no order. You understand? So let's go to let's get a classic precept. So this is why their authority and power and influence was likened unto iron, right? Because they had damn a bunch of Edomites, all with different mindsets, giving counsel on what should be going on. They didn't have that one king that just called all the shots. You understand? Hey, and they lacked order, right? Because even in the kingdom of heaven, we're gonna have chiefly the Most High God, right? And Yahweh Shai gonna be our king, and Yahweh Shai gonna call all the shots through the Spirit. Ain't nobody gonna be able to buck up against Yahweh Shai. I think maybe we should do it like this. I think maybe we should do it like that. No, it's gonna be like damn how Nebuchadnezzar was. Whatever Yahweh Shai say, right? Chiefly through the Most High God, Yahweh. Hey, whatever he say, it goes, right? And that's why even the Most High God likened their kingdom unto a golden head, right? Let's go to 1 Corinthians 1 and 10 through the Spirit, right? So this is the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 10, and it reads, now I beseech you, brethren, by the name of our Lord Yahweh Shai, that ye all speak the same thing, right? So, hey, this is how we're going to be in our kingdom, the kingdom of heaven. We're going to all speak the same thing, and that there be no divisions among you, but that you be perfectly joined together in the same mind and in the same judgment, right? And these Edomites had 320 senates, man. They weren't all perfectly joined in the same mind, and you understand, in the same judgment. Right, and they had a bunch of different city states with different laws and different rulers. Hey, the Edomites don't have no order, right? And let me get one last thing dealing with the Romans, right? Yeah, I want to bring this up. We ain't gonna watch the whole video. They weren't just
changing their political status. They were establishing a form of government that would influence politics for thousands of years to come. Upon freeing themselves from the conquering Etruscans of the north, the Romans formed a republic. A system
right, so the Romans had a republic,
and
it says a system. Salaki, I want to read that. System of government in which citizens chose representatives to govern on their behalf. So they also had a system where the citizens could speak up and they called shots, right? Hey, man, that's why their authority was likened unto iron, right? Bad quality.
With this, they established a governmental system which was a precursor to many in our modern day world. To understand the political structure of the Roman Republic, we must first understand the importance of social class. The natural-born inhabitants of the Republic, who were not slaves, were broken into two main groups. They were the patricians, members of the upper class, including the nobility and wealthy landowners, and the plebeians, or the common people of Rome. Unlike today's society,
that's the same spirit America in. That's how we know we're in modern day Rome.
Were completely separate and distinct. Intermarriage between the classes was the political structure of the republic, of the government and its officials. While also being the commander of the army outside the city of Rome, we can draw some loose parallels to it and the American presidency. However, unlike the presidency, two patrician men ruled as consul. They had the power to veto one another and were limited to
that's confusion. They had two damn rulers, and they said they had the power to veto one another. Look at that. That's confusion, man. Hey, nobody couldn't veto Nebuchadnezzar, right? In the kingdom, ain't nobody gonna be able to veto Yahweh Shai, right? That's why their quality is likened unto iron, man. Their authority was terrible. How the hell you got two rulers that have the power to veto one another, right?
Year term. In times of crisis, and in order to make swift, concise decisions, one man could be elevated to dictator over the republic. Trying to make sure the patricians could keep control, the consuls were elected from the Senate, a group of 300 patricians who were in essence the lawmakers of Rome. They made decisions on
You
spending
had 300 different men that were the lawmakers, right?
while also controlling taxation and relationships.
They don't have that one king that say this is what's going to go down and that's what's going to go down and I'm going to do this and you're going to go to war with them and we're going to do this. They had 300 men being the lawmakers and establishing these things.
Differences. Perhaps most obvious, the senators of Rome were not
Completely
chosen by
out
the
of order.
citizens. They were chosen by the consul,
And obviously in the kingdom, we're going to have 144,000 men governing and ruling under Yahushua, right? And under the 12 apostles. Hey, but we're going to all be on one accord. We're not going to be out there doing our own thing. Hey, I'm ruling over 10 cities and these are going to be my laws. And the other brother is ruling over 10 cities and that's going to be their laws, right? Hey, man, we all going to have the same laws. We all going to speak the same thing through Yahushua.
were elected for life. The last governing body of the Roman Republic was the Assembly. The Assembly allowed plebeians or common citizens into its membership. Like the First Amendment right, they were in charge of choosing. The Assembly chose the consuls and courting
we can see how much confusion they got.
This setup
in their
allowed
order,
the wealthier
right?
plebeians who were not patricians, no matter how much money they made, to wield substantial power. It was politics at its best, very much like a president of the plebeians. The man holding this position had the right to intervene on legal matters and veto legislation. He also held the right to summon the Senate, even making proposals for their consideration. Between 449 and 450 BCE, the plebeians of Rome gained another victory through the law of the 12 tables. These were a code of laws which spelled out civil matters, crime and punishment, and relationship among citizens and family members. Most important about these new laws, both patricians and plebeians were bound by them. I read this because in studying this, it's important to remember that social class played a huge at the top of the Roman Republic.
So you just see it's a lot of confusion, right? So I don't want to watch the whole video, right? But we see it's a lot of confusion, right? But let's go into the last part of this dream, right? So we went through, let's go back to the picture, right? Daniel 2 dream, right? Oh, we get a statue, right? Shalaki, I want to get that same picture. I guess we got to type in dream. Right? That's the one I want right here. Right, so this is, we went into it. We went into the head of gold, right, which represents the Neo-Babylonian Empire. We went into the chest of silver and the arms of silver, which represents the Medo-Persian Empire. We went into the belly of brass and the thighs of brass, which represents the Greek Empire. And we just finished going into the legs of iron, which represents the Roman Empire. You understand? Right, so we kind of went through it, went through the brief summaries of the history, right, and now we're gonna go into the the feet of clay, right? And let's go into it. So this is the book of, let's go back to Daniel. Let's go back to Daniel. So this is the book of Daniel. So Lakia, bear with me. I don't know why I just did that. Daniel 2. Right? This is the book of Daniel to the 2 and verse 33, and it reads, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part clay. Right? So now we're about to deal with the feet. That's part iron and part clay. Right? So I want to jump to verse 42 real fast. Right? And it says, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, right? So it's dealing with the same thing. So the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken, right? But we want to deal with the 10 toes, right? So this feet, it's 2 feet and it's 10 toes, right? So it's a bunch of separation going on. And they're also part iron and part clay, right? And we understand clay is weaker than all the metals, right? And clay's quality is worse than all the metals, right? So the 10 toes and Daniel 2 and 42 are the same 10 horns in Revelation 12, right? So we got to kind of go deep into this thing and give the understanding through the Spirit, right? So this is the book of Revelation, chapter 12 and verse 3, and it reads, and there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads, right? So them 10 horns is the same 10 toes that we read about in Daniel 2:42, right? And the 10 horns represents the European Union. That's what it would be called on a modern day level, the European Union, which consists of Belgium, right? Because these are all the original 10 countries that were a part of the European Union, right? Which is Belgium, France, Germany, Slovakia, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Spain, Ireland, UK, and Greece. These were the first original nations to join the European Union, right? And on the ancient names for these kingdoms, right? The ancient name for Belgium, which would be Belgicia, right? We're gonna go into it. Let's go into the ancient Roman Empire map, right? This to show how brothers not winging it, right? Slovakia, ancient Roman Empire map. Right? Let's see if we can find a good one. This is a pretty good one. Right, so let's go into it. We're gonna go into it. Right, so this the ancient names, right, for the 10 horns, right? So the 10 horns, it'd be Belgium, which would be called in the past Belgicia, right? And you can see on a geographical level, right, that it's in the same area as Belgium, right? Right, so Belgicia which would be the ancient name for Belgium, right? And you see France, the ancient name for France would be Gallia, right, or Gaul, right? The ancient name for Germany, which would be Germania, right? Germania, I should say, right? The ancient name for Italy, which would be Italia, right? The ancient name for Luxembourg, which would be Lugdunensis, right? The ancient name for Spain, which would be Hispania, right? So these are the ancient names for the European Union, right? Which is going into the 10 toes. You understand? So it'd be Hispania, right? The ancient name for UK, which would be that's what I want. Britannia, right? That's the ancient name for the UK, right? The ancient name for Greece. Slovakia, bear with me. Where is it at? Right, the ancient name for Greece would be Achaia, right? I'm kind of trying to find it. Here it goes. Slovakia, bear with me. The ancient name for Greece would be Achaia, right? Achaia, right? And the ancient name for Ireland shared lands with the UK, right? So it'd be in Britannia as well, right? And same with the Netherlands when it comes to Belgicia and Germania, right? So the Netherlands would be in the same area as Belgicia and Germania, right? So these are all the ancient names of the European Union, which is what the 5 toes is going into, right? So let's go back into Daniel, right? So this is the book of Daniel. So you had the ancient 10 toes, which would be the European Union, but they weren't called the European Union back then, you understand? Right, so this is the book of Daniel to the 2 and verse 41, right? Let's go right to Daniel 2. So you got to kind of know the ancient names, right? And they were all part of the Roman Empire, right? And today, they're part of the European Union, which is an alliance with America, right? So this is Daniel chapter 2 and verse 41, and it reads, I don't know what's going on. I kind of can't zoom in now. I don't know what happened. It's all good, right? So this is the book of Daniel to the 2 and verse 41, and it reads, whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, right? So the different provinces have their own leadership and government even today, right? And they have the strength of iron because they're an extension of the Roman Empire, right? And the Roman Empire was that iron. And also have America to back them up, which is Rome all over again. You understand? Right? So these 10 toes, right, which would be the European Union today, they have the same strength of Rome, right? And they also have America, which is basically Rome,